Export inSIGHT, where we have regular discussions on all things trade related. First of all, I'd like to introduce our panel. We have Jacasta from Australian Multilingual Language Services.
Hello, and it's wonderful to be here. And our company is very engaged in assisting companies that are looking at exporting into any market or attracting investment trade with anything pertaining to translation across all platforms and cross-cultural marketing support.
Thank you, Jacasta. I look forward to more questions a little bit later. Now we've got Gint Silins from Spruson and Ferguson. Gint, would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, I've been a patent attorney, trademark attorney for more than 20 years, and our firm has offices throughout Asia Pacific. We do all things IP, protecting IP in Australia and around the world.
Fantastic. And then we've got Adam Pearce from Export Finance Australia. Adam, tell us about yourself.
Yeah, so Export Finance Australia is Australia's credit agency. So we're basically here to lend money for businesses that are exporting, and finance is a challenge. So if your business is growing, finance is a challenge, come talk to me.
Fantastic, thank you so much. And I'm Richelle from the Export Council of Australia. Now today we're going to be talking about China, and to kick it off, the first question I have is for you, Jacasta, because I want to talk about the different etiquettes there are between when you're doing business in Australia and business in China. There's obviously such a vast difference. So can you tell us a little bit about how you adapt your etiquette or how you behave in China?
So there's a very different cultural premise from which we would undertake engaging in business relations with Chinese counterparts. And two of the key foundations for that relationship are going to be looking at the fact that a huge part of the Chinese culture is a sense of hierarchy based on seniority and position in the company.
Sure.
And a huge precedence is given to anyone who has a senior position in a company, and often you'll find that in a business meeting, they will be the person who is introduced to you first, and there'll be a huge amount of ceremony around that introduction.
Yes.
So it's a great honour to be introduced to that person, and it should be returned in as much as presenting yourself with huge respect, shaking hands, and with two hands presenting your business card, which will show that you take that relationship very seriously. In addition to that, you'll find that in a business meeting there is a huge array of protocol surrounding where people are going to sit around the table in the meeting, who will be given the offer to talk, the order in which people talk. You'll often find that in a meeting in a company in China, you might be visiting China and be there with one or two of your colleagues from Australia, but generally what you'll find is that the main people that you're there to see will also have their entire entourage with them, because even though there's a huge amount of hierarchy given importance to, there's also a sense of everybody needing to hear what's being said, and everybody being listened to, and all the opinions being listened to at the end so that decisions can be made. So don't be alarmed if you find that you're in a business meeting where there's just yourself and your colleague, or even just yourself, and you're in a room with half the Chinese company that you're there to engage with. It's a sign that you're being taken seriously and importance is given to your visit. So that's something to take well. And then around the idea of business, it's very important to understand that it's a very different approach to talking business. The subject probably won't even start to evolve around the crux of the matter of the business engagement until a huge amount of questioning and rapport building has taken place. And that can be quite personal. There might be questions asked about family structure, about your parents, about what you do for sports, about where you might have travelled in China. Have you eaten yet? It's almost like a way of saying, how are you? And it is really important to engage in that process.
You know, I think it's interesting. I think as Australians what we forget as well is that our culture's like just over 200 years old, and their culture is like more than 5,000 years old. So there's a lot to learn, isn't there? So I think I could talk to you all day about the different kind of etiquette to use. But
yeah, sure.
I might use that as a bit of a segue and come over to you, Gint, simply because when we hear about China, I think the first fear that comes into people's mind is your intellectual property and how do you protect it? Because I hear so many horror stories, but tell me, do we bother with our IP when we go into China? What's your thoughts?
Yeah, we should definitely bother. China has IP protection systems in place. For example, you can protect inventions by way of different types of patents. You can protect the appearance of products with a design registration.
Yes.
You can protect your trademarks with trademark registrations. you can protect your artwork and other things under copyright registration. So there are definitely protection regimes there, and they do work. You just have to understand the nuances of how they work, and you basically have to get in first for trademarks before it's possibly pitched.
So sorry, just to clarify that, you said that there's the IP regime in China, but you're using an Australian IP firm to put this in place, not a Chinese firm, correct?
So what happens is, depending on the type of IP, right?
Mm-hmm.
If it's a trademark, you may be able to do everything through the Australian firm, through the Madrid Protocol.
Yes.
It's a possibility. If there's a problem during that procedure, then you need to engage a Chinese agent over there. For other IP rights, you do need to engage a Chinese agent, but your Australian agent, your Australian attorney will help coordinate
Right,
all of
that was my question. Whew, sounds a bit confusing. It's like you haven't got enough to worry about when you've got a business going to get all this in place as well.
That's it.
It's very confusing. So Adam, I'm going to bring it over to you, and I'm going to change tact a little bit, because again, what's another hot topic at the moment is the US-China trade war. So tell me, how are people negotiating this? What insights do you have for us?
Yeah, well, what I can tell you, Richelle, is I can give you some insight of what clients are actually doing at the moment. So clients that actually manufacture here in China or manufacture over in China and supply to the US. So they're the ones that are largely impacted in this. So what I'm seeing, some of the strategies, what these clients are doing is twofold. Firstly, they're looking at potentially relocating the manufacturing firm away from China.
Wow.
And yeah, that is a huge
That's
cost in
massive.
time, cost, resources. However, if that relationship in terms of the Australian business manufacturing in China to US, supplying to the US, is important to them, the beneficial way off needs to be done. So that is one method that they're doing. You know, by doing that, they might end up having two manufacturing sites, which is, you know, an overhead as well you've got to manage. But if the US relationship in terms of that customer is important, that's what they're doing.
And we don't know when it's going to end, do we? Like, really? This trade war, how long could it go on for?
No, I couldn't even answer on that one.
Yeah, that's
But,
right, that's right.
But the other thing I am seeing is a more proactive approach, is slightly less burden in terms of resources, is businesses are actually looking to have an agreement with their customers in the US to pass on some of the tariff. So they might mutually share some of the tariff
Interesting.
as it's getting staged increase.
Yes.
So they're actually sharing that on a basis of volume, and so there is another tactic to talk about. I guess the important thing about that, Richelle, is actually understanding within your business plan that things can change.
Yes.
You've got to be agile, you've got to be flexible, and you've got to move with the times.
Yes,
And
agree.
2 years ago, this wasn't an issue. 12 months ago, it wasn't an issue. So the important message here is plan for the unknown.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely.
Really true. There's also a new legal framework being brought into play in China this January, which would affect international companies invested in China and how they operate, and that's something I'm sure Gint would know more about, but it's something I've been reading a lot about recently, so that's probably affecting your clients who are based in China with their operations as well.
So Jacasta, talking about your clients in China, how do you build rapport when you're in China?
So one of the first ways of actually looking at building rapport is through introductions. There's a
So who you know,
huge
it's
amount
not
of
what you know,
weight
it's who
based
you
on
know.
who you know. And another way of really establishing fast track introductions is to introduce yourself as having weight in the country that you come from.
Right.
So for example, if you introduce yourself as being associated with the government department of that industry that you're trading in,
Yes.
and in addition to that, having won several prestigious awards that are recognised countrywide, that will put you in really good profile.
Yeah.
And then people will be
advice.
attracted to that
Yes.
and elevate the pitch of you, as it were, because
Yes.
they'll think that they're introducing a person that reflects well on them also
Yes.
in terms of
Yes.
their honour.
In terms of the hierarchy scale
That's
that you
right.
mentioned before.
So that plays into that hierarchy scale
Yes,
and
sure.
relationship building. And the relationships and the hierarchy play hand in hand,
Yeah.
very much so. But one of the things that I really see a lot of our clients doing, which works extremely well for them, is in addition to relying on the rapport that they build with Chinese counterparts and distribution agents or buyers, is looking at entering into direct relationship with the supermarkets or the chain stores and having a combination of e-commerce and bricks and mortar.
Yes.
And that helps them to fast track the entrenchment in the marketplace there,
Yes.
and be able to speed up the process and the return on their investment. So
That's great.
it's really good to build up the rapport, and there are also parallel activities that are really important to consider going alongside the relationship.
So what I'm picking up from you is that you need to be patient. It takes time.
It takes
It's
time,
not going to
that's
happen
right.
overnight when you're building these
And
relationships.
there are some really amazing wins that some companies have made, overnight
Yes.
success, like the
Yes.
brand Veha that make ethically produced trainers.
Right.
Famous film star Jack Chan was seen wearing those, and
Right.
from really not being sold in China much at all, overnight they became a huge hit success.
Fantastic.
And now Veha has a chain department store in every single city in
Fantastic.
China. So it's-
Fantastic.
that's a luck thing, and it's rare that happens, but you can always aim for that as well.
So let's go back to if you are exporting. Adam, I wanted to ask you about your payment options when you're dealing with China. Is it good to just have one option and stay with it? Do they change? What's your thoughts? What's your advice?
Well, it's a good question. It's a question that comes up every time when you talk about China and payment schemes.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, in the finance world, we often refer to it the honeymoon period. And that is, initially when you're first starting to do trade with someone in China,
Yes.
you're on that honeymoon period. You
Yes.
get really good terms.
Yeah.
That might be payment in full. It may be a larger deposit so that you're not too worried about getting a profit.
Yes.
You've already got it up front.
Yes.
You've got control of goods.
Yes.
However, as the relationship matures and the terms of trade increase, the buyer generally wants to get some kind of terms. So that generally changes. So the relationship that you have, like Jacasta was talking about,
Yes.
is really important to build on that. So what we see often is that once the honeymoon period is sort of extinguished,
Yes.
they want to go into terms. So again, it's about understanding your working capital need. How long is your working capital cycle that's needed to produce it? If they're not paying a larger deposit or paying up full, coincidentally, if you're not controlling the goods and sending them over there,
Yeah.
then waiting for their terms,
Yeah.
you've lost control.
Yes.
So control is important, but understanding your cash flow is really important to that, because as the relationship evolves, the terms change.
Yes. That's
And
great.
again,
advice,
I'll talk
of
about being
course.
agile, because it is so important to
Yeah.
actually know who you're in bed with when
Yes.
you're doing business.
Yes,
So-
yes, and I also hear that Chinese obviously have a very different way of negotiating things as well.
They do,
And
they do.
if we're not used to that, then we could just be really surprised at how that works.
Yeah.
So maybe that leads me on to you, Gint. What stories have you got in relation to IP that you could maybe share with us?
Okay, so a recent happening was an Australian manufacturer
Yes.
got a client in China. The client bought a lot of goods. Then the Australian manufacturer asked me to check the Chinese trademarks database to see whether they had protected their trademark there, because the manufacturer really wasn't that interested in China. It was just like, oh, well, if something happens, we'll move on again.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of interest shown in China. I found that through the Chinese trademarks database searching, that these Chinese national, the purchaser, was in the process of registering the manufacturer's trademark as their own.
No.
Had also registered a couple of Chinese domain names containing that trademark.
Oh, no.
So we're fortunate that the trademark hadn't been registered yet.
Right.
We're fortunate that the goods had been shipped, but they were still reaching to
Right.
reach mainland China, the shores.
Wow.
So basically, we used that as an opportunity to lock up the goods so they wouldn't be released until the trademark and the domain names were assigned to the manufacturer, and that actually
What a
happened.
fortunate outcome.
Wow, that's amazing. Did it take long? Was it a long process?
It was a rush process,
Wow.
and it happened. It wasn't straightforward. You needed the cooperation of the Chinese national.
Wow.
Otherwise, the trademark probably couldn't have been signed. It would have had to take other type of action. So it worked out well, but the lesson is, if you're thinking of exporting to China, get your trademarks on board, registered there
Definitely.
beforehand. Otherwise, someone else could register it. And when asking this fellow why did he apply for registration of the manufacturer's trademark, he said that it was to protect from copies coming into China, unauthorized copies. That was it. So he was protecting his own position and that of the manufacturer.
It's not the first time
That's
I've heard
nice.
that. It's really not the first time I've heard that. So let's talk about when you're dealing with suppliers.
Yep.
What's important when it comes to payment? What factors have you got to consider?
I don't think it's just payment. I think, like Jacasta pointed out, it's about relationship.
Sure.
And one of the key things that I see with businesses go to China, as they being their manufacturer, is they don't build a deep enough relationship, or they don't visit country enough.
Is
visit
this
the
just
premises.
China, mostly China you're talking about, or?
It is important in
Yes,
China.
it is absolutely important.
But I wouldn't discount if you're manufacturing in other countries,
Yes,
you should
of
go
course,
see it.
of course.
But China, I think it's really important that you're comfortable with the quality of work that's coming out.
Uh-huh.
So it's about that relationship you build with
Yes.
the right people. The biggest piece of advice I can give is making sure that you are comfortable dealing with the people you're dealing with. That story that you talked about, Gint, we've heard it all before, and I think we'll continue to hear it as well.
But it makes it hard to give trust into a relationship that you're building. So
Yeah.
it's almost like a dual-edged relationship where on one hand you have to be extremely cautious, and on the other give a lot of friendship building signals and work very cautiously.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
What we see is obviously as time has gone on with manufacturing in China is the quality is getting better, their work ethics are getting better as well, so making sure you've got similar values is really important. Payment is just one method that you've got to cross off the list, but I think in terms of understanding who you're getting in bed with in terms of your manufacturer is really important.
Yes.
Can't stress the most important message is regular contact in terms of face-to-face.
Yeah, that's great advice. That's great advice. What about you, Gint? What advice do you have for those exporting to China?
Safeguard your IP.
Yes.
So before you start looking for potential distributors, agents, sellers, whatever, if you
Lock
think,
it down.
lock it down.
Definitely.
Yeah,
And
that's
I
the
would
first
say-
step, isn't it?
Going back to, sorry to interrupt you, but even before you start really talking to people in terms of pitching to Chinese counterparts, protect your IP even before you start exposing what you have to offer.
Yeah, definitely. That's great. Did you have anything to add to that? In terms of
Does anyone else want to sell IP services here?
I certainly advise our
I did have one more
clients
question
speak to you on a regular
for you,
basis.
Jacasta, because I feel that when people are selling in China as well, people look at brands differently over there. So what advice would you have? What should people focus on with their brand strategy
Yeah,
when
so-
selling into China?
If you're looking at pitching into China, there's a lot of competition already in the markets for
Yes.
any type of product in any industry. It's a very sophisticated marketplace, and Chinese consumers have access to products from all over the world, Europe,
Yeah,
the
right.
States, so it's not like we're the first country exporting into China. But what Australia has among the Chinese psyche is a general sense of what we are is clean, green, ethical, healthy, fresh. So that's a really good thing to
Fantastic.
capture, and a really good way to try and integrate that into a brand's image is to create a provenance story that talks to the history, the location, the sustainable way in which the product is produced.
Yeah, fantastic.
And also combine that with playing into Chinese values of huge importance placed on family, on the symbols and the colours that are important in the
Yes.
Chinese cosmology.
Yes.
And another thing that I would say is not directly related to the brand, but it's a part of the communication that you then roll out, is make sure that you feel to Chinese people like your fingers on the pulse of the patterns of life in the Chinese year. And there are lots of times of the year where there's an important cultural, religious festival.
That's great advice.
And so that, for example, we've just celebrated the Chinese Lunar New Year.
Yeah.
Throughout the year there are other festivals which are religious, but there are also lots of commercial festivals which are enormous. And
Right.
so it pays to feed into those and have a presence around those in your online presence.
Yes.
To show that you are you're there, you're in China and you're responding to what Chinese people are living.
Yeah, you're making an effort. Okay, quiz time. Who can tell me what year of the rat means?
That's this year. I know that.
Rats are one of the most intelligent animals.
Oh, there you go.
So probably all about innovation and amazing new breakthroughs.
We'll have to confirm that. So look, just before we go, I'd like to just run through for our listeners any resources that might be available. Adam, can I start with you? What resources do you have in mind for
Yeah,
our
certainly.
listeners
I think
exporting?
Export Finance Australia's website, it regularly contains publication on country information, so
Sure.
we can actually get dialogue on how to do business there.
Yes.
with Austrade as well, another government agency which can assist.
Yes.
There is actually a handy app called Export Essentials,
I was
which
about to
is
say,
really,
that's
really good
great.
tool.
Yes.
It's not a 101, but it is really good because it actually gives you step-by-step basis of how to go about dealing with exporting to various countries,
Yeah,
Fantastic.
government
perfect.
agencies, contact points. So it'd be certainly something to.
And it's been
to look
really
at.
popular, so Export Essentials. Just
Correct.
put that into your app when you're searching, and that's on Android and iPhone.
100%.
Perfect, that's what I love to see.
That's
Was there anyone else that you wanted to include? So Austrade?
Just come to me.
Yeah, that's all you need. That's all you need. I love it, I love it. Gint, over to you.
Yeah, look, I'm going to plug Spruson of Ferguson has
course.
articles on China, other places, always worth a good read. Check out their website. I'll also put in a plug for IP Australia,
Yep.
which is the Australian Patent Office, Trademarks Office, etc. They have a few pages dedicated to IP protection in China. They put a guide for searching the Chinese Trademarks Register. They talk about patents and designs in China and Hong Kong.
Can't we just get you to do that?
Hey, fine. So it's a good resource, it's a good read.
Fantastic. So IP Australia and of course Spruson and Ferguson.
Yeah, so if you want to find the IP Australia site, put in your search engine IP protection in China, IP Australia,
Great.
and that should bring something up. If not, send me an email.
Send you an email. Fantastic. And of course all our details will be available after this session. And Jacasta, any resources from you?
Absolutely. So a really good starting point is contacting us, because not only do we have a network of extremely expert linguists in Australia,
Lovely.
but we also have a team of people on the ground in China. So for any business
Great.
meeting that you're going to, it is amazing to have a Chinese-speaking interpreter with you to interpret what's being said in the
100%.
meeting, and also
That's
act
so
as your
great.
cultural guide and help you through all the etiquette and the protocol that comes
Yeah.
with introducing yourself at meetings. And then beyond that, there is also a huge resource that's the Australian Trusted Trader Program that helps companies become export ready
Yes.
in terms of customs barriers, breaking them down, both
Yes.
leaving Australia and then entering into the export marketplace. So that's something that I'd certainly recommend companies look at.
Wonderful, wonderful. Just to close off,
I have one more
Yes,
thing,
one more.
Jacasta. So if I have a client who's looking for a Chinese, to develop a Chinese trademark, is
Yes,
that something you can help out with?
absolutely. Yeah, we have a network of contacts with legal companies in China as well, so we can assist with that.
Okay, great.
that's great. Look at that relationship building.
That's the way.
Happening.
Okay, obviously I'm from Export Council of Australia. We've been educating businesses in their trade skills department for more than 60 years, and it's something we love doing and look forward to doing into the future. As mentioned, all our contact details will be available after this session. We look forward to hearing from you, and until next time with Export inSIGHT, we'll see you then. Thanks for your time.
Thank
Thank you.
Bye.
Hello and welcome to Export inSIGHT. I'm Richelle from the Export Council of Australia. It doesn't matter where you are in your export life cycle. We cover lots of topics, and it's for beginners and it's for also those that have been in exporting for a long time. What I wanted to assure you is that no question is a silly question. So it doesn't matter what you're looking to do or where you're at in your life cycle. Please look at the email address on your screen and touch base with us. We're happy to answer any questions that you have. We look forward to seeing you again, and thank you for joining us at Export inSIGHT. Bye-bye.